Good morning, everyone. Thanks. We have the case study at 8:30. Thanks for coming at such an early time. I think a lot of us have not come for 8:30 like breakfast meeting for a long time. I think this panel is very timely because that was actually like last weekend. I still remember. I suddenly received a lot of calls, right, from my clients, friends, asking a lot of questions, and leads us to this study. Just because after reading all this information or on a daily basis on the channels, YouTube, or on all that social medias, right? I still remain a lot of questions remain unanswered. I have lots of questions to ask. That's why, at the early last week, we start to compete. Get the panel up. So we got you can see we got the top tier panel here from, let's say, Lawrence, from VSFG, the first Type 9 asset management specializing in virtual assets, and also Gary OSL, the first crypto exchange license in Hong Kong. And also we got, of course, SAMSON, the Coinstreet, and also the Ledger enterprise service solution provider, Leung from FTX, who is specializing in the Chapter 11 frequency and also investigations. Robert, obviously from Deloitte, the Big Four, and all that. And Tony, of course, the chairman from the HKBA, who can talk a lot about the industry and the potential impact of this incident. So without further ado, let us invite maybe King to give us the opening speech. Thanks.
Thank you much for the great leaders in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is back. There are lots of really meaty content shared by the leaders. I'm not going to say too much. Just two key points to share with the audience. But there are those who may not be following what the government / STB, SEC, Hong Kong, HKBA are doing. Now, in a nutshell, we look at the policy announcements on the 31st of October. This is almost like unprecedented. They have so many of the key government officials basically singing on the same song sheets. This is quite unprecedented for those of you who are tracking what's happening in Hong Kong. Now, at the end of the day, virtual assets is by far one of the, I would say, top three agenda items. I'll say Fintech / virtual assets is one of the top three agenda items if you ask the leaders at FTX. Now, but what does that mean? What that means is not just about, as I also mentioned on my LinkedIn post, it is not just about crypto trading, prop trading, and so on. We have a much bigger goal. And that bigger goal is tokenization of a lot of financial assets. This is literally hundreds of trillions of dollars market size. So that's why, the reason why I mentioned this is because, so that would involve touching on, of course, on Ethereum, but also the STOs of bonds, the real estates, the IPs, and so forth. This is something that, a lot of government colleagues are extremely bullish and excited. Now, and on top of that, I think when you follow the policy announcements, you also recognize the word of green bond tokenization, right? So this is another thing that we are definitely working on to try to get as much access for the various market participants as possible, as opposed to just banks. Now, so the first thing I'm trying to really highlight is the fact that the whole tokenization opportunity is massive. So this is something that you probably hear a lot from us over the next couple of years. Now, the second key point is, when you look at the key people, but at least in the past, we think about the licensing, you look at SFC. Now, but then, as some of you would know, SFC has a relatively lean team responsible for virtual assets, so they cannot do everything. At the same time, at FSDB, you ask Secretary Hui, Secretary Christopher Hui, another Secretary Joseph Chan, they're so supportive of the whole VA movements. But then, there's only one Chris and one Joseph. So then, the point I'm trying to make is that we definitely would like to reach out to the private sector. And the way that I see the Hong Kong play a role, because we work very closely with HKBA, SFC, and FSD, and so on. So we kind of know the gaps. So it's not that potentially we want to leave the gaps there, it's just that they have really limited manpower. So the way that we see how we can work with the private sector is that we would rename the Hong Kong team. We work closely with all of you like the event today. So for me, I'm also learning. I'm not learning here. So once I learn about what the private sector is thinking, then I would go back and understand what are the things that HKBA, SMC, or FSD is working on, and inevitably there are some gaps. So for those gaps, then I'll come back to you and ask you, okay, I know it's important to have crypto banks, right? The banks are willing to open bank accounts, for the sectors, the VA operation. I understand that. There's also some comments about, the insurance premium is too high. You have to be mandated to buy insurance, although this is not going to make us very competitive. We heard that too. But then we heard all these comments, but then at the end of the day, there's only one team listed, one team, Chris and Joseph, they have to prioritize. So then I have to work with you to see what are the things that can get the biggest impacts. And by then, you can just basically knock it off one by one. So I think this is a more practical way. I just want to share with you, and you can share with your industry colleagues and so on. So the government definitely understands it. It's really coming down to about which one has to be handled first. So with that, I just want to hand back to the organizer, and thanks for attention. And then we are definitely back, and we are trying forward. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kim. So may I now invite Henry to give us a brief introduction of what's happening about the FTX incident. Thank you.
Yeah, just all that of you here today, I'm sure you guys are fairly familiar with the background of all this, but I just gave a very short recap of the incident, and leave more time, of course, for you guys to ask questions to the panel and all that. So just a little bit of recap for everyone. Obviously remember our famous figure here, Sammy Bankman-Fried at SBF. He started off in 2017 on the Alameda research, right? And as a quantitative trading firm, according to some data, that was very successful, and therefore, and then making 50 mil or more US dollars in a couple of years. So that, and you say, I just find that the trading platform that I've been using out there are not very good, very professional. So therefore, I have to start my own platform, which is now then she started the platform FTX in 2019. So in the last 4 years, that's from one of the court documents, right? Basically, in the last 4 years, he built an empire, which they with 130 subsidiaries, right? As you remember, and then they classify it into 4 silos. So it's one of them is called the WRS silos, which comprises of the FTX US, Ledger X, and FTX derivatives mainly. And then the other one is the Alameda silo, the cryptocurrency, the crypto ETF and the venture investment, the digital generative digital assets. The third one is the venture silo, you can see, and the last one is the .com silo, which is mainly the FTX.com and some real estate. So it's mainly held by SBF, 90% mostly, and then the other main guy is Gary Wang, holding 10%, and then the other Nisha, the minority shareholder in the whole platform. So that is, of course, we're not going through this, but you can see that all these subsidiaries, I think the empire that you can see so far, 130, I'm sure there could be a lot more once the more investigations go into place. On the 2nd, I think all the whole story started on the 2nd of November, not long ago, seriously, just 2 weeks back, right? And Condex published a story revealing the balance sheet of Alameda. Basically, I think that the key message from that article is that Alameda research assets does only have out of the entire 14.6 billion assets, 5.3 USD and actually FTT, and the current market cap out of that is 3.35 billion. And the other illiquid assets are actually consist of Solana, Bit, and SRN, etc. So that is the start of the story. And then I think that's triggered. I'm not sure whether well planned, but Binance and soon after that, based on the market reaction, so that then they announced that they were planning to liquidate approximately all the FTT holdings worth $580 million on the 6th of November. And then on 7th, you can see, and then a lot of of course, the account holders got concerned and start to withdraw from the FTX. On the 7th, more than $6 billion were being withdrawn. Then of course there are a lot of the surrounding FTX since 8th of November, and then the price of FTT crashed, and then on right one day after that, and the FTX got the withdrawal from all the account holders, and that's I think the surprises. And interestingly, remember, I think that's Binance on that they signed the letter of intent to acquire FTX.com that day. So during those days, you remember, actually there was a secret call from Sam to Zizi, of course, and they say, "Oh, can you help us out? We have the front and they have buy out." Somehow they signed a letter of intent. But I can still remember one of the clients that they asked me on that day, right? And say, "Oh, I remember my prediction on that one said they would not close the deal." But I thought that would last at least a month. But I cannot believe that one day after that, then she say, "Sorry, I backed out of the deal for whatever reasons." Yeah, because if you look at the letter of intent, that was well drafted. I'm not sure whether it's Lloyd drafted or Martin drafted. Basically, they announced the whole world FTX was in trouble, right? It's a confirmation to the market that's in trouble, and then I will acquire them. But so that would get FTT even worse, right? And then the prices get to like $2 to $3 and all that. And on the 11th of November, I think Sam had no choice. Then he got to file the Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That's the story so far. I think that's the background. So on the 12th of November, based on the leak sort of balance sheet, and so now some of the court documents just reveal that. Now the current assets held by the liquid assets held by FTX is just only $900 million or could be less, because some of that have been hacked, as you understand. After that, after 12, I'm not sure. I will ask some of the experts here how that could happen. But now the total debt right now is nearly $9 billion. So you can see the gap out there, and that's why Sam had no option but to file the Chapter 11. Interestingly, I think one of the most interesting thing is if you look at the investors in the FTX group, right? One of the Temasek, right? Temasek like investors $205 million in this group, and according to the news out there, right? They spent 8 months, more than 8 months of due diligence on FTX.com before they decided to invest in that. And one of the questions is, what's up due diligence they have done over 8 months, right? Maybe in Bahamas, wherever, right? And what's up? And the other thing, interestingly, is Sequoia. Sequoia like invested $230 million as well USD in SAM. If you look at one of the reports, right, and the memo, they say the thing they want, why they invest in that, because he believed in SAM. And why they believe in SAM? Because of his ethical behavior. I mean, that is the thing. I can't understand. Well, how did they come to that conclusion? But I think that's all. That's all the interesting about that. And of course, I have like sympathy to the teachers in Canada, right? The Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. So they have invested $7 million on the FTX group. So on that, their retirement plan and all that money is now gone. So I think that is some of the background, and I think we should start the question panel. Should we?
Yeah, sure. So any questions?
So far on the background, yeah.
Actually, what was this mess?
What's called that is the thing we try to answer today. Because interestingly, I've looked at all the, as I said, the channels and all that. I have lots of questions. That's the reason why, instead of me, I'm sure a lot of my friends have similar questions as well, and that's why we come to this panel. We will answer more. Should we maybe, invite the speakers? Yeah.
So
Hong Kong went through several stock market crash. When quite informed the SFC was involved in provision process. What will happen? Similar or Greek? Greek means what? You see, in the traditional stock market, keep the money and the boss use the money. That becomes the problem.
Yeah, I think I think well, interestingly, I think is that because as you guys can understand, like FTX, like their headquarters are actually in in Hong Kong before, and actually in Pacific Play, some of you would know, right? But that's not open to the public. Yeah, and then of course, after some discussion of the SEC and regulators saw that they're not appropriate to be run operated in Hong Kong, and that's part of the reason they moved to like Bahamas like early last year. So I think I think like the regulators, to be honest, I think done a very good job in regulating this, and they actually they have been very active, as some of you know, in looking for the information, whether from the media, on other channels. They do identify some illegal operations on the exchanges or other schemes or projects or ICOs or tokens offerings and all that. And that's therefore, I think, if you look at one of the chart later on, actually the Hong Kong investors are not so much affected. Compared to, of course, some of them are affected, but not so much affected as compared to some of the other countries like South Korea.
Okay, so let's start our panel discussion. May I now invite Lawrence, Mr. Lawrence Chu, Chairman of VSFG, Director of BC Technology Group, Mr. Bob, Mr. William Tan, Managing Director of FTI Consulting, Mr. Tong, Chairman of Hong Kong Blockchain Association, and also Mr. Samson Lee, founder and CEO of Coinstreet. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think you can see there's a star panel, so I can go there. That's for more. The first question that we need to know, that's the question that we want to ask, right? How could Temasek, like after spending 8 months and all that diligence and all that? Because the reason why I was like, because Lauren has lots of experience, like venture science, lots of experience, like investing. I think Lauren started investing in this space like from since 2015, if I remember correctly. But yeah, maybe you can go through it, like how could that have happened for a big firm like Temasek?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Henry. Thanks to all the panelists and the team for putting this together. So, first question is that a trick question? Am I ever going to get money from it?
You seem to know those people as well, right?
So, yeah, actually, I met with the person who was responsible for the investment last week in Singapore. So he was moderating on a panel. Didn't go into the details of the investments, but I think, as an investor, personally myself and also as a firm, it's very hard, right? I think we are here to invest in people, which is very important, and also companies and their teams and the business. And I think when people make mistakes, which a lot of people do, that is acceptable. It's very hard to look at fraud. When someone has the intent to fraud or defraud, they do all they can to hide the fact. So I don't want to criticize or comment specifically on Temasek and their 8-month process. If you look at a lot of the investors on the cap table and you hear a lot of the noise, you do see there's a bit of a FOMO, right? And we were in that heat of the moment last year when everything was going, up. A lot of shortcuts, a lot of things were being, fast tracked. And that's human nature. As one of our guests also said, that's greed and human nature. But if you look back, and it's not a crypto thing, this is every tech bubble, real estate bubble, all these kind of investments, it's kind of the same pattern. So I would say it's very important to take a step back and look at what you invest in and do some deep research. But I think the overall, again, one of the observations I have from this incident is probably around governance. And this is why regulation and having investment professionals who understand that, they may be very smart, but again, at the same time, may have overlooked some key basic principles when you're looking at investing. And you will see also even smarter investors or other smart investors who didn't participate. And one of the first things that I see regularly in this, especially in this incident, was that people ask, so who's your board? There was no board. You're a $35 billion company, you have no board. That is probably one of the simplest red flags among a number of different things. So I would say it's not specific to them, but to a lot of investors, especially at the $35 billion mark. It was $3.5 million, which is still a sum, but you're backing a seed stage startup. Sometimes it's okay to, I would say, let the founders and the team do their thing. But when you're $35 billion investing for, and then on behalf of various fiduciary institutions and clients and pensions, you may want to just have a checklist like you do. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of my panelists here interact with sovereign wealth funds and big institutions, and that checklist is pretty long. So I think having discipline is quite important.
Okay, yeah, but just on the board, right? Just you mentioned that yes, that was no board, and there was even no board minutes and all that, and they actually use app, right, and to discuss things, and they have an auto delete function for that. I don't know. That's how it's reported, and find out that in a matter of days by the new CEO, right, John Ray. Just on that one, right? Normally, as a lawyer, like some of you may know that I'm a lawyer practicing in this space. You for Thomas Cycles acquire like making such a big sort of like sizable investment, they would normally require a board seat on their board, right? But none of that happened, right? All of these investors, none of them request for a board seat. Is that normal? And is that an indication now on all the future, like for all investment, then I would at least require a board seat when I have a meeting?
Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? And I don't want to comment specifically on this or that investment as I don't know all the details. But the number looks very big, 100 million, 200 million. But what is that as a percentage of the market cap? So very, atypically would a company give a board seat to someone who owns, less than 5% of the company, right? So if you look at the numbers from a percentage basis, it doesn't seem like a very big percentage. Again, it was done at a $17 billion market cap, $35 billion market cap, whatever the number is. So in the relative scheme, it's a very small percentage. Of course, it's a lot of money. And again, back to discipline and requirements, even if they were not entitled to a board seat or asked for a board seat, it could be an independent thing. For example, even our company, we're not listed, but we have an independent board member. I mean, this is just governance and experience, I would say, and not just for outside people. I think it's for yourself. I feel that's the check and balance that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think on the as some of you know, John Ray has now been appointed as the CEO of FTX Group. And he mentioned actually one of the latest declarations, right? Never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here. I would love to ask Gary, because as you know, Gary is now running the OSL, which is the first licensed crypto exchange in Hong Kong. How would the license exchange be different from a company like FTX?
Okay.
What can we expect? Yeah.
I really like the approach Lawrence is taking, which is really take a step back from a lot of the mainstream reporting, because it's very attractive, sort of with the benefit of hindsight, to pick the most juicy bits. And I also agree with one key point. I mean, detecting or totally protecting yourself from fraud is notoriously difficult. But what are the things that are very useful in the toolkit? I mean, sometimes we focus a lot on decentralized exchanges versus centralized exchanges. We characterize the two things. We say, trustless architecture in decentralized setups. Having to rely on key man risk or trusting too much an institution in centralized exchanges. These, to me, are actually not very useful at all. You can find a lot of reasons why decentralized exchanges have their own problems. For example, lack of accountability, and also who you can sue, right? In the case of decentralized setups. We're not just talking about this as attractive headlines. Regulators have the same problem. In the US, in Europe, they're trying to pinpoint many of the decentralized exchanges pinpoint a responsible person. How do you define that? Or how do you even define which legal entity is actually running what? So I think before we sort of really try to answer that question, I just want to get that out there. Same thing as centralized exchanges, or for that matter, either trying to or deciding you're going to rely a lot on a single financial institution. You can have the same problem. So really, it doesn't go back to clarity around defining what is a legal relationship, clarity around defining what is the actual legal structure, what is the corporate governance. 100% agree with what Ryan said earlier that we can get into details a lot more. But certainly some of the really key points I mentioned there, like a books and records. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, when you're dealing with that many zeros, yeah, it's a pretty big question. So you know, I think that's just to sort of warm the conversation.
I think Sam's answer to that is that because there are too many zeros, it's hard to reconcile and all that, right? and the thing is, I have let's say, can you explain a little bit more just like on also like whether they have what sort of like corporate structure that you guys have implemented, or what sort of like accounting or keeping practice that you guys have?
Sure. I mean, I guess we can generalize a little bit more because ideally the way OSL runs as a licensed firm, ideally should not be unique to us, right? If you pick a brokerage in Hong Kong, if you pick a licensed bank in Hong Kong, and you pick the next licensed bank, ideally the basic operating parameters and the basic modus operandi should be similar, even if there are unique quirkiness with each institution. But certainly things like books and records.
But on the token side, I mean, have you done any expected?
So even token side, even on the token side, on the one hand, sometimes we talk about, you know, for example, the reconciliation we do against the blockchain, or we say the wallet infrastructure is a segregated wallets, but that's just part of the picture. There's actually a lot more, and I would argue a lot more important stuff that is not a blockchain. So, for example, definition of legal relationship. You can't get that on the blockchain. Well, not at the moment.
A lot of relationship cannot be.
Well, no. And similarly, and I think Robert's going to explain some of that for us. But you know, for example, people say, okay, you can see on my wallet address on a public blockchain that I've got the following assets. What you can't see are the liabilities, right? So, and that's just the starters. So once again, legal relationship extremely important. Difference between trust relationship. So if I'm a trust beneficiary versus if I'm a secured creditor, make a world of difference when the platform goes bust, right? But often these things are overlooked when it comes to people signing up and they look at the user experience, right? Yeah. User experience really good stuff, and a lot of platforms succeed and also fail because of user experience. But these things don't define the client relationship when it comes to things going bust. And so regulated institutions and licensing, most of these risk controls are about maximizing your chances of things not going bust, or maximizing your chances of detecting when things are wrong. They don't totally prevent them. So, for example, transparency doesn't necessarily prevent a platform going bust, but you can detect it a lot sooner, hopefully. So, timely disclosure, regulatory reporting. So, and that one's a really good one. You know, they say, okay, so what if you have a license? You can still go bust. Sure. But, for example, if you're a bank, you're a licensed broker, if I have a capital shortfall, I have a criminal liability for failure to report report on a timely basis. Or alternatively, if I stop my auditor coming to audit my books, criminal offence straight there. Or I falsify my records, criminal offence straight there. Why am I focusing on that? It's the stakes. The stakes are really high for people responsible for running a regulated firm. If I don't report, if I falsify my records, if I stop my auditor visiting me, or if I stop the regulator from executing a search warrant or executing an information demand on my premises, criminal offence straight there. There was a case published by the SFC about 2 weeks ago of someone impeding an authorized officer of the SFC from executing an information demand, right? So these things matter because think of all the people, whether it's FTX or whether it's OSL, whoever it is. If I'm an employee working for a firm, am I going to risk criminal liability for the sake of potentially doing an extra day of business? So I think these are actually important questions. And to be honest, they've got nothing to do with blockchain.
Yeah, anyone have to add on Yeah, I think because you touch on the audit part and all that, maybe I'll roll up first because that's very interesting. According to the declaration recently made by January 3rd, right, is that the FSF group have actually significant liability arising from the crypto assets. But actually, they have got two audit firms doing regular audit on them. One is they have the Amanino LLP for the WLS silos and Treasure Matters for the .com silo. So they have done a regular audit and have audit report and financial statement. But even despite all this audit practices and all that, still you can see there's a huge gap on the thing, and some of the assets got missing and all that. How could that happen as well from the audit side? Well, auditor, what did auditor do, right? And despite this hard work and all this, failed to identify such problems.
Thanks, Henry. Before we're talking about what the role of the auditors and the responsibility of the auditors and the directors, a lot of people is talking about, or you guys may know that recently the platform say that they have doing some proof of reserves, proof of assets, and proof of liabilities. What this means? Is this, do you think that it is enough to protect the investor? Because everybody is coming out to issue a statement or make an announcement talking about they have how much reserves on their balance sheets, and it is significant or enough to protect the investors. You're always asking this kind of questions. And the main questions here is that as an auditor, I can say maybe this is only a snapshot. What's mean by a snapshot is that, say for example, at the balance sheet day, as the reporting day, that is the December year end, some window dressing, you can do it. Say when you read an annual report of some listed companies, everybody is asking about the cash positions, the liquidity positions. Sometimes before the reporting date, the directors or the management of the companies will try their best to get back all the accounts receivable on the balance sheet. After the reporting date, this money will be transferred out, and you can only get the main point as 12 December year end day. Other you cannot know. I can give you an example is that as an auditor or as an investor, how can you know whether there is such kind of problem here? I will request the auditors to check whether there is any significant transfer of fund inflow before the balance sheet day. That is maybe the 29th or 28th of the December, and then subsequently the January 2nd or January 3rd, a huge amount of the fund is transferred out to the another companies. So this is one critical one that we're talking about the efficiency, or whether it is enough for the proof of the reserves. And the second part is that what Gary mentioned is I think we need to have a comprehensive reporting system or regulatory framework. That is, for example, is the internal control, right? Any segregations of duties among the whole team. We're not talking about the fraud, because fraud will exist in the app. Every company will exist here, but any protections that the management teams has adopted, say the internal control and the segregations of duties, like the multi-signatures, when you need to do the private key, something like that. A lot of things, I think Gary's team or the regulators say, the SFC, in the future, they need to think about how we can implement this kind of internal control to this platform. Especially they have a lot of experience, the SFC, say the brokers firms, the equity brokers firms, the securities firms, the futures firms. I think everybody's relying about the FRR, the financial resources rule. It's a monthly reporting. They need to know the capital adequacy of the securities firm, the asset and the liabilities balance, every monthly reporting to the regulators, or even the platform bring some voluntary disclosures on their platform to let the investor know. I think all this is very important. Well, what I mean is that we have a comprehensive, detailed, structured reporting for the whole investor, but not only like the past is the monthly reporting, maybe even we can bi-weekly or what the platform think that it is important to the investor, we can do that. So back to talking about the audit. At this moment, I believe it is very a difficult task for the auditor to perform the whole audit of the for the platform like Gary's companies. Whether we have a audit trial or auditing standard for the crypto platform, I think every regulator is thinking about how we can adopt a through and a transparency reporting for this audit trial. It is very important. Some of the auditors may very pessimistic and talking about we need to know all the address and know all the transactions of the investors and all of the people they need to know. But I think it is not. They cannot do so because of the cost and benefit. We need to balance this. So in the future, the regulators, auditors, and the platform, they need to sit down and talking about how we can set up a regulatory framework and set up a new auditing standards for these platform and also for the funds and also for the say the type 1, type 4, type 9, and type 6. This is very important.
Okay. Oh, Gary, maybe you share a bit more, like, because I think you have not gone through the audit, right, for a listed companies, right? Which done really well, like congratulations on the stock price, right, for the last week. But share a bit more on how do you do the audit? I mean, when on the offers of virtual assets, right? I think you got one of the big tools to help you on.
Sure. Yep. So our licensed entity has been operating for close to 2 years. We've gone through one full financial year audit already. So if you, I guess for those of us who are sort of familiar with traditional financial institutions, we have to do all of that. So the auditor, as an auditor appointed under the SFO, sorry to be a little bit technical, but as an auditor appointed under the SFO, they report directly to the SFC on audit findings. So standard audit metrics, I'm not an auditor, by the way, so if I'm sort of talking to BS, do shut me up. So standard stuff they absolutely have to look at because it's prescribed is compliance with client asset protection rules. The reason why I'm being that specific is because as a virtual asset platform, most of what we handle are not securities. So the traditional client securities rules technically don't apply to a lot of our activities. So how do we bridge the gap? The SFC actually created a set of requirements under the virtual asset terms and conditions, which effectively we have to comply with to the absolute down to the last letter. But there's also a great deal of what we do which are covered by traditional rules, namely client money. Money is money. So Hong Kong D, USD, that stuff sits in a segregated client money account. So compliance with those stuff is bread and butter of the financial audit. And then in addition, books and records. I think as Robert, Lawrence, and Henry have all alluded to, these are the hallmarks of from the regulator's perspective and auditor's perspective of generally how much they can give credit to the risk environment of the firm, right? If the books and records are sort of a little bit crap, that gives them a pretty good idea that they're dealing with something potentially they need to look much deeper into, right? But on the other hand, if the records are very good, and on this point, it's also worth pointing out, that's not totally abstract. The SFO actually does prescribe standard. So the relevant standard we have to comply with is we have to have sufficient books and records to allow tracing of client assets throughout the different transactions and throughout different movements within our operating system. That's what auditors look for. So I think for example, look at what Robin mentioned earlier on. If there are unexplained movements of client assets, that would be a pretty big red flag. Right? So if we take some of the collapsed platforms, that's also one of the really important points there. Definition of when something is a client asset, that is actually hugely important, because in theory, a platform can go bust at any point in time, any day of the week, any time of the day. So these sorts of reconciliations, how often we do reconciliations, are extremely important to protect client assets. So the fact that a licensed firm has to report on a monthly basis to the regulator and to provide a breakdown of client assets gives the regulators a very good snapshot of what sort of control environment we're talking about. And once again, it doesn't, just to get it out there, it doesn't totally prevent fraud, right? But what it does is it really narrows a window of, number one, how long potentially something wrong can go on for before it's detected, and also the number of ways you can detect irregularities. And these will sort of, once again, doesn't totally protect, and it doesn't totally prevent, but it narrows the window very significantly. So that I think that would be the key message.
Okay. And one more point to forget I think I need to talk this point as well. Everyone knows about the Alameda, right? The most important thing is that even we have a reporting, monthly reporting to the regulators. The most important is that it's about the related party transactions, right? We should know the relationship between the funds or the platform, that the platform will also issue some coins as well. Any concentrations of these coins, good guys behind is holding these coins, right? And the valuations of these coins, right? Everybody's know that because only a few transactions and only 1 to 3 bodies are holding these coins, and then the valuations can be increased a lot. But afterwards, we have some collateral and some money growing, and this is very it's dangerous to the investor. So the related party transactions, what the SFC or the stock exchange of the capital market always require that we have a very stringent, or we have a lot of requirements for this reporting for the related party transactions. So I think this part is also very important in the long run for we build up the crypto exchange as well.
Yeah, on this front, right, I think one of the questions which I've been asked very often is that a standard valuations method for tokens?
I think this is
Is it average of all exchanges, many exchanges, or what?
I think it's a very difficult question.
It's meant to be a simple question.
What's very mentioned is that, say, for example, is STO, we still have a method to do the valuations, because from exact backup, we have the DCF, a lot of valuation extra here. But say, it's only related to the demand and supply, right? And I can only say that for evaluation technique now, as what the auditor will focus or the regulator will look at the valuation model is that we will see where there is a willing buyer and willing seller in the market, right? If there is a willing buyer and willing seller, then we will say that it is a fair value, this is a fair market price. But if it is, we sometimes say that is a thin trading. If there is only a few transactions here, or even only have 1 to 2 transactions during each month, any other factors that we need to consider, say any discount factor, whether we need to look at any related party transactions, what I mentioned between the seller and the buyer. Sometimes we need to do some due diligence work or even some audit works. If there is some, we have some concern here, whether additional reporting we need to mention in the annual report or in the auditor's report or to the regulator is that we know that this is only a few transactions here, and the buyer and the seller, maybe whether we need to disclose the identity of this as well. So I think we need to think moving forward whether any requirement we need to disclose here.
Lawrence, you have something to add? Or the valuation? Because as an investor, how do you?
No, I'm just thinking of microphones. Just very
Yeah.
brief before maybe I.
Well, when you
can
make investment,
elaborate.
right? Of course, you talk about like the valuation of you have investment of tokens, obviously.
Well, I'm not gonna talk about my book yet, but I think just from as an investor
Yeah.
experience, I mean, I'm just looking at regulatory
Yeah.
platform, which is one of the big topics of today. Is just look at the charge, right? It's not so much just looking at market value. I mean, you can make it whatever value you want it to be. But I think a lot of things are built are not meant to be reinvented in the simplest form. If you look at what the capital charge is for banks to hold digital assets, you'll know how to assess what kind of capital is required to make these type of investments. Of course, that is ultra conservative to the extent that they're telling you don't do it, which is probably not very helpful for the industry and progress. But something in the middle, I would say, as a practitioner, you don't even need an auditor to tell you, what kind of risk to take. I mean, I think that's the role of professionals and the industry is to set those boundaries, right? So FTT, would you value it at 100% on your books, given the parameters? I don't even care what kind of token or asset it is, illiquid, tightly held, et cetera, then you need to make a judgment call on what is a adequate charge or LTV you want to apply to it, right?
Yeah. After the FTX scandal, right? A lot of the mainstream centralized exchanges have issued what they call the regulatory proof of reserve certifications, right? And I tried to got a summary table here at the data source from Binance, right? So Binance has of course claimed to have a proof of reserve of 71 billion, Equinix 8 billion, Crypto.com 275 billion, Terabit, and OKX 6 billion, and all that. Because now a lot of investors, account holders are concerned, obviously, right? And I think the regulatory reserve proof of reserve certification is a key term that I keep hearing for the last very often last week. Would someone be able to explain to us what is a regulatory proof of reserve? Someone have go with that, please, with the audience.
I just talk and
How reliable is it? I mean, that's it.
even that Mercury is that I think usually involved in the blockchain, you know that or the know, but this is just one kind of the auditors or the practitioners is saying that this is a way can at least can do something to let the investor know the research of the company at that moment.
On a Merkle-Tree 30-second explanation. So they used it in Bitcoin as well, but it's something called a binary hash tree, which uses a cryptographic method to it's a cryptographic method to hash together a bunch of addresses into a tree, and it rolls up into a single number. So in the case of all these people that have deposited to addresses, it's a bunch of people that are sending blockchain assets their own corresponding address. They send money in. So you take the set of those addresses, hash each address together, and then take the hash of the hashes, hash each of those together, take the hash of the hash of the hashes, and then you've got one big hash at the end. That proves the total balance, and it proves the set of addresses that are in this big tree. So anyone who's got their own blockchain address corresponding to an exchange, verify their assets are in a Merkle tree set using some complex maths. And you can also say all the things that have been deposited to this exchange, without revealing everyone's set of addresses to the world, you can then say this is all. So it's an interesting method. It probably isn't complete, but it's an interesting step towards showing the assets that we're holding.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's certainly from a tech perspective that educated me. I think what would be really interesting is once again we look at these examples, and then we also look at, for example, sorry, the reason why I'm holding this sort of yellow bundle, not just because I'm a lawyer, It's because I actually want to look at some of the terms and conditions of, for example, dealing on FTX, of all things. And so the really important element is fundamentally what is the definition of your relationship with the relevant party who has now just received your asset. I'm using my words very carefully. So sometimes we say, oh, I've deposited something with a certain platform, or a certain platform is holding my stuff. What does that actually mean? So FTX is a good example because now it's bankrupt. What it means now will determine whether you're at the head of the queue or the back of the queue. If you're an unsecured creditor, you're back of the queue. If you're potentially a trust beneficiary because they have declared that they're holding assets on trust for you, you're at the head of the queue. So and I think on that we have an expert here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think the only thing I'll add to that is I think that practically, as a consultancy and structural practitioner, what happens in practice may be a little bit different. So you would have the parameters and the regulations, or the user agreements to enter into the relationship start. But if the company then overpulls your money at a later stage, it's not protected or gets too late, unfortunately, for customers and account holders, you're all together. You're all up together as a pool. There's no way to untangle that comminglingly. And so as much as there are regulations or user agreements at the start, if unfortunately there is bad actors or fraud, then fall into that 100 creditors who share baskets as well.
Maybe I add on to a bit of that on the liquidation, on the process and all that. Actually, based on the current information, right, they plan to say the debtors have secured in a new cold wallet of approximately $740 million of cryptocurrencies, which is believable attribute to all these FTX silos. So the debtors have not yet been able to determine how much of the cryptocurrency, unfortunately, is allocatable to each silo and all that. That means there's $740 million out there, but they cannot determine which one is which because it's so messed up. There's no record and all that. That will take some time to figure it out. I think one of the recent questions I've been maybe it's a bit from the legal angle is that a lot of client friends just ask me what sort of things they could have done. I mean, now it's Chapter 11, which we'll come on to. I think one thing is that first of all, you should actually, of course, keep the record. Because some of you may know FTX.com, I mean, they have sort of removed all the info and all the info on the app that now dropped to zero. I mean, hopefully all of you would have, whoever is still have possession with them, you keep all the records. And most importantly, please keep your mobile phone, whatever, or the original or the laptop. Even if they're not usable at all or in the future, or you want to keep it aside or want to buy a new one. Why is the case? Because there could be, or whatever the information is out there, you could say, oh, I do have a screenshot, right, of the position and all that. That could be challenged in the court, the authenticity of your screenshot. If that screenshot is not accepted by your consult, let's say the FTX in the future, or whatever, that's the same rules seem to apply to your future. I mean, if any cases involving cryptocurrencies or virtual assets, right? Then if there's any dispute on the authenticity of your screenshots, then you will need to take out your laptop or computer or your hard disk or your mobile phones, right? And then that will be examined by an expert. That will be the case. So please do keep those aside and also keep that safe, right? Because obviously there are still some money. It's not that much, right? But still 740 million, and hopefully John Ray will do the job to retrieve more, which I will come to that. And lastly, please do remember to issue a demand after all to whether through lawyers like ourselves or by your own in-house lawyer, whatever, you have a position with them, send out demand letter or send a demand. The reason why is that because now they have basically erased the record, and as you now know, they have very poor record anyway internally. So that the fact that you send them a demand, at least they will know your existence, that you are a cardholder, and your at least your alleged position with them, so that in case that new management, new operation team then would be able to contact you, for example, and you can negotiate that as to how to deal with the challenge. But now I think come to, of course, William. Interestingly now, FTX now filed for Chapter 11 in the US, and a new CEO has been appointed. Can you maybe explain to us more, because we're almost like a Hong Kong audience here, right? And the Asia audience. So what does it mean? What does it mean by and what does it mean by Chapter 11? And what are the account holders of I believe some of the audience here know are the account holders at FTX. So what can they expect to receive, expect to happen? I mean, yeah.
Thanks, Aaron. I think the news is still obviously developed very quickly, so it wouldn't be right to just speculate on the FTX situation exactly. But if we look at some past bankruptcy filings, maybe I'll start with just a bit of what is US Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It is a very, very different regime to what we have in Hong Kong, what we have in parts of the world. I can speak for hours about this, but I'll focus on two main things. One is that it is inherently a restructuring regime, not an insolvency regime, in the sense that it is not to liquidate all the assets into funds. The mandate is to try and come to a more holistic solution for everyone. It's also a debtor in possession scheme, which means that the company has control. So it's not an independent third party that comes in to control it. The company, by its new CEO, John Ray, is still in control of the business and still making decisions. Now, there is the concept of a US Chapter 11 trustee. John is not a US Chapter 11 trustee, he is a CEO. The trustee can be put in by the court or by a creditor or a petition if there is allegations of wrongdoing, if there is certain circumstances that warrant a third party come in. So at the moment, there is no US Chapter 11 trustee of FTX. John is the CEO and he is managing the business. The second point on US Chapter 11 is that it is an incredibly transparent process. And so everything, all the information that we have most recently, come from what is called the first declarations. So filings that the company has made to the US bankruptcy courts are entirely public. And they're so public that to the extent to, say, Celsius and some of the more recent collapses, the companies have actually had to disclose all their account holders, so all customer accounts and all customer details. And so that's how public the process is. So that's good and bad because you really get to see the whole sort of dirty laundry, but then there's also a lot of privacy concerns as well. So that's broadly the two main sort of takeaways from the Chapter 11 process. It's probably worthwhile reflecting on some of the more recent Chapter 11s of crypto vendors such as Celsius and Voyager, who followed in July of this year. There's not much talk about withdrawals at the moment or ability to get money back. There really hasn't been a large-scale exchange that's collapsed in the US. This is probably the first one. So there's no timeline to. The restructuring industry, we don't move as fast as the virtual asset industry does. So just to work out the entities, legal processes, that's going to take months. On the extreme end, if we look at, say, Northbox, Japan, that entered the Japanese bankruptcy process, that entered in 2015. And so most customers still haven't been able to withdraw from that. So I think in the scheme of things, we're talking in years rather than months, unfortunately.
Understand. Interestingly, according to John Ray, they said this is one of the worst, bankruptcy situations that he has seen, right? He has actually worked on the many big cases before, including Enron. But he said even this situation even much worse than Enron. And now report FTX has more than 1 million customers. account holders, and they still have the position with them. So for example, so what should they do, right? Other than, is there anything that they could have done, or could they expect to have a voting on the restructuring plan, or would they expect someone to come to them like at some point?
Yeah, that's right. I think Gary mentioned it earlier around the user agreements, the framework and constraints in this with. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, the practicalities of it, there is code funds, then you really just become a general unsecured creditor. So the recent example, not recent, in 2011, the financial commodities stockbroker put out a global that were considered to Chapter 11. At the time, it was the 8th largest bankruptcy in its history. MF Global similar allegations of COVID and money-related transactions. That MF Global had 38,000 customer accounts. That took years to unravel. FTX has over 1.2 million customer accounts. So the scale of this is unprecedented. It's going to vary jurisdiction as well. So if customers want to participate in the Chapter 11 process, they can actually come together as a group. It's what's called UCC, that's called the Creditors Committee. They will have advisors, legal advisors, restructuring advisors. They will group together to represent the common interests of unsecured creditors, which those 5 people who have this current state. They can go together into the Chapter 11 process and have a voice in that. So the other thing about Chapter 11 is it has an extraterritorial effect. And so what that means is all the entities that have involved in Chapter 11, you can't go and sue them in Hong Kong or in other jurisdictions. In the US Chapter 11, very typically the US, everything they say they want the law to follow. And so, there's nothing, if you have your account holder, say in Asia, and you're like, oh, screw US Chapter 11 process, I'm going to sue someone myself. Little ramifications. If you do so in Hong Kong or in other jurisdictions, various sovereigns, it could be with the US, or if you're a bank, you could have your US dollar account suspended. So there are ramifications that can often apply in the US Chapter 11 process.
Okay. So interestingly, as we know, ISAM allegedly is now still in Bahamas, right? And the Bahamas, the SEC there has already issued a few announcements. And so what do you think? What the interaction, do you think SAM will be sort of expedited back to the US, for example, for question and all that? And also Caroline, obviously, right? Whoever see her, right? Please never on the street and all that, maybe like see next to me. But then, what would happen? Would they extract all these people or the ex-staff and all that back to the US, and then the potential consequences to them? Or like for channels, like Elizabeth, like soon recently, she has been sentenced like for 12 years, if I remember correctly. So would there something similar happen like that could we expect here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the different jurisdictions all have very different structural regimes. And the fact that in the Bahamas, FTX markets have appointed a liquidator or a traditional liquidator, that is almost directly in competition to the US Chapter 11 trustee. So they're essentially competing to see who will run the FTX at the moment. And so the US hasn't seen a decline on that. And so when the Bahamas declared recognition, their approach from the West, following out the US corresponding function, said, no, why do you want to plan it? You already have Chapter 11 ongoing. And so it's really going to depend on the jurisdictions. Extradition is a little bit more broad in that legal sense. I think it sounds like there are some DOJ investigations happening in the US, but ultimately, whether or not they have extradition rules with others, that's all like via the agreement. But at the moment, I think it's something we can draw a parallel to is when Leung was collapsed in May 29. That was a number of different administrations and bankruptcies and liquidations around the world. It had different conditions, different countries. And some of them work together, and some of them were adverse to each other. So ultimately, it's going to come down to that jurisdiction. If you're the point practitioner, what is in the best interest of your creditors? So there's going to be competing things, and there's going to be something that different practitioners can work together on as well.
Yeah. Interestingly, on the asset side, right? As allegedly, some of the assets are being, of course, used by and being able to move by SAM over the years, like secretly without notice of anyone. I'm not sure how that happened. Maybe, yeah. I think that's the question with SAM, because SAM is the license, actually the solution provider, ledger solution provider as well, and has been running Coinstreet, one of the activists for the STO as well. So I think the question is that if, let's say, some of the clients are using the Ledger Enterprise solution, would that be able, any of the staff, right, be able to move their tokens secretly with the notice of their directors and all that?
Thank you, Henry. I'm SAMSON, founder and CEO of Coinstreet. Sometimes people call me Sam. I'm not that Sam. We've been 5 years old tech companies in Hong Kong and different countries. Currently licensed broker-dealer in US and under application of Type 1 in Hong Kong. We are also holder of the TCSP license in Hong Kong. We have been partner. I mean, like if we step back and look at this incident, right? I think we can look at it in 3 levels, right? First of all, is the compliance level, and then the measurement and the enforcement, right? And some companies choose to be compliant, some doesn't choose to operate without a license, right? There's plenty of example out there. And of course, definitely make a difference if for an exchange complies in the Hong Kong jurisdictions compared to Bahamas, right? So that's a big difference the investor have to look at. But even for the regulation, I think it's just a guideline because people choose to follow and there are people choose to break the laws, right? And when it comes to measurements, because I think from this case, we do see a big gap for business like this. It's very crypto native, actually not using the adequate technology on the measurement side, right? Thank you for coming of the gentleman's back there about proof of reserve, right? There are a lot of things we can actually keep tracks of the movement of the assets, right? Because we're talking about all cryptos here, all the wallet address, right? There can be actually a lot of transparency. And even there's no demand for the investor, like for Tamasat and all those funds, because even they don't have a board seat, they can actually demand a lot of measurement put in place. We have more transparency of the asset and what's the situation, and also for the customer as well, taking a position on the exchange. So one of the things we did is we partnered with Ledger since 2019. I'm not trying to advertise to them, but what I'm trying to bring out is there's actually a lot of solution out there. One of them is the managed wallets, right? We heard about hot wallet on the exchange and cold wallet, which is have no transparency. As mentioned earlier, now even nobody knows what's in the FTX cold wallet. But the managed wallet is a third-party companies, with a lot of credibilities and technology setup, set up dedicated server in the HSM data center, and they manage the wallet on behalf of the exchange, right? That's also supporting the idea of segregated accounts, right? Because in that case, I think it can probably prevent a lot of the issues. And whether there will be a way moving forward, first of all, on the regulatory side, whether there will be a needs to have the asset to be managed by a third party, right? Outside of the platform. There are some jurisdictions already implement that, but even within the same organization, like this, it's not difficult to put in a technology infrastructure, right? That's completely separate wallet on the managed system. We don't even need audit because it's supposedly it is transparent and able to. I think for the customer, needs to be able to have visibility of what's going on, right? Because for the company point of view, it's very simple. They have to I can imagine they define like what's the wallet of in-house and anytime the transfer. And even in the wallet, it can set multiple level, only trigger a certain notice if the transaction surpass a certain amount or to a certain condition. They can define the normal trading platform and also the wallet outside of the normal scenario, like for example, in this case, transferring the sister company, right? It's not be on the whitelist, right? Kind of scenario. So what I'm saying is, I think there's a lag behind now when we're moving into the Web3 and crypto digital asset space, but not implementing and utilizing the technology enough, right? In this case, a lot of the investors focus on the trading performance of FTX, how good they are, the performance, but they overlook they can actually put in a lot of measurements to protect themselves.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Right. I think for the last one, I want to talk a bit about the market, right? So we have briefly mentioned. I mean, for this, so there's one of the summary of the monthly unique visitors to the FTX.com, and you look at that. Actually, South Korea, Singapore, Japan got most of the impact by the FTX collapse, right? From that angle, and Hong Kong is actually just right down there with the 106,000 visitors. So if you look at that, I think we have protected, I think, and the regulators have done quite a good job on that. So maybe a question for Tony, because he's the president for the HKBA blockchain associations, right? So how do you see what have you seen by the market, the impact like since the FTX incident like so far? I mean, so what have your members or your clients like questions?
Actually, FTX has a very big presence in Hong Kong. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have their funds and cryptos in that platform. And their office was previously in Pacific Place. So many Hong Kong people felt comfortable sitting right. So, yeah.
And Sam was sleeping there.
Yeah, that too. So, they've done a very good job marketing and advertisement. So they're perceived as a very with strong background, and they're also the high frequency traders, professional traders. They like the platform because the pricing, it's very good for as far as the market making. So compared to some of the others, I mean, they do perform very well. I know Hong Kong, many of the people who are involved here in the OTC business, they trade a lot of USDT, they trade a lot of BTC, and they use the FTX platform to get the best pricing, best execution. So that's I think I've known a lot of people, our members, they're figuring out what to do. So they have to talk. They have to talk to they're asking whether they should go to US or go to Bahamas, how to get the money back. So that's
just basically based on the recent reports, right? It is a report that like more than $700 million has now exited the Solana-based decentralized apps, including a lot of those being like invested by Saga last year. So now the total value being locked in this DeFi is just less than $300 million, roughly that range. So maybe just open to all the panels because what do you see, right? What do you expect to see? Because and you can see a bit of a summary of the position, right? Some of the very well-known name here, Galaxy, I have a huge position, 77 million stuck with FTX. Ember, they is claimed to have like 10% trading capital with them, and even Animal Brands, Crypto.com, and all that have position with FTX. And I think recently that even say Grayscale had got a bit of issues due to the FTX as well, right? And not to say blocked by wages, they were supposed to bail out for FTX and now back into trouble and all that. And the Solana ecosystem is huge, obviously, and people have a huge back on Solana. So what do you expect to see on not just FTX, right? On the whole ecosystem, all this coming and all that. Any sort of predictions here? No, and no one has a crystal ball.
Yeah, I can give you some insights. So I think the purpose of today's talk is also to share some of our thoughts and experiences. And, long story short, I feel it is a regulatory framework that we are all discussing about it. Regulatory mindset, maybe, is more important. So there's a lot of things that we technically can do, and technically it's already implementable, but it's all about people and really what is the way forward. So you can see the knock-on effects of an FTX are pretty big. Mind you, last week, as a regulated platform, that's the reason we have no exposure to FTX, Celsius, Anchor, you name it. None of our clients lost any money on this because we are already implementing certain technical factors. So I would say for the regulatory framework, it bodes well for participants who want to have exposure, but done in a way where they're exposed more market rather than infrastructure, right? So, and most people, I would say, their investment into this, and not just crypto and digital assets, but any assets, you're not punting and trading every day, right? Most people have portfolios and wealth managers who do a lot of that work for them because they are all regulated and within a framework. I mean, we trade with OSL because they're regulated. We work with wallet and ledgers and cold wallets because it is a technology that we can prove, and we work with big accounting firms to prove that. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of things that is already in the traditional finance, but of course, in the new finance era, there are things that we all need to improve on and adjust. I mean, that's the whole point, because there's new asset classes, new ways to do it. In terms of like our understanding, last week on some of our investment portfolio, we went through 3 days straight of review. Thankfully, a lot of our companies had already learned from Anchor in March, which was also very big, but probably a little bit more crypto and less retail. But this obviously fallout is outright fraud rather than mistakes. And the knock-on effects are relatively large because a lot of their counterparties deal with them. And the big issue is also these counterparties actually also have retail participation. So the knock-on effects on retail is quite big. And institutionally, I don't think it's a good thing, but institutionally, I think private investors or sophisticated investors, they should do the work, right? That's what we get paid to do as professionals. So if you're a counterparty and you didn't do the work, then there's some internal problems, right, that you need to face yourself. And hopefully with the regulatory regime, that gets balanced out. I'm not saying that we should go 150% so stringent that it really suffocates the industry. But there are certain best practices that Gary and all the panelists were mentioning that we can adopt and really adopt for this industry. And it has to be slightly different. So that's kind of my take.
May I ask a question before going on and all that, right? One question is being asked is like, how is BNB different from FTT? And why? I'm
just wondering, share my little 2 cents. All these platform tokens, or they're most of these crypto exchanges, centralized crypto exchange, or even decentralized, they have their platform token, and that's depends on the success of the platform. So if the platform is very successful, yeah, you get to settle your payment for discounted payment on your transaction fees. So it's actually useful if you trade a lot on this platform. And it's also somewhat of a dividend scheme, so you get to share the profit. So now FTX go down to zero, so it's not worth anything. It's just like a Zimbabwe's currency. If the country is not, it's not worth anything. If BNB, I think Binance seems to be one of the winners. Coinbase is also a winner. I think OSL as well. So that's my 2 cents on this. I have another comment is on you mentioned about Solana. Actually, Solana is many of you already know it's a very popular blockchain layer 1, so it's supposed to be a Ethereum killer. And I think it's, I was in Singapore at Token 2049, I attended their hackathon. So the community is still there. They still rank top 20 blockchain, top 20 tokens on CoinMarketCap, I think top 14 or 15. Although the price has gone down from as high as 200, now is about $12. It's still worth $4 billion, the market cap of Solana. So as a blockchain, it's boasting 65,000 transactions per second, so much higher performance than Ethereum, and there's some new blockchain that's claiming even higher than Aptos and Sui. And so I think Solana is still worth something. We still have to see if their community is still going to build a blockchain. So I don't know how much FTT owns or the creditors if they get to share the Solana. I think FTX is one of the biggest investors in Solana. So I think that could have some impact on the liquidation process. Let's find out if the creditors can get to share some of the Solana.
Anything to add here? I think.
Yeah, I think on platform tokens, one of the problems I think is actually down to basic definitions. Often, actually, there is a great deal of difficulty defining what the heck that token was. I mean, we call it token. Doesn't matter what name we give it. The problem is we still don't have a very good way of defining what the heck it actually is. So when it comes to a holder, actually saying, okay, how do I value what I currently hold? What are the metrics I use to actually form that view, right? Do I look at what are my legally enforceable rights? Do I look at user behavior? Do I look at what other people are doing if they're holding the thing? We don't really have a very good set of metrics. So I think on Lawrence's point, that's why I think we can go back to fundamentals when it comes to, for example, institutional investors. Do we have a very good toolkit to actually use when we're assessing either a platform or an asset? So I have to agree. One of the key roles of regulations is to actually give us sort of a baseline. At least we know what is the beginnings of that checklist. So and this is just to give you one example. One of our institutional clients, they said, okay, well, let's look at what your regulatory obligations are. What do you do with a client asset? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's just a starting point. Next step up, since you claim to be a blockchain company, since you claim to have segregated client wallets, let's look at what those wallets are. And then they say, okay, what are the manual processes that your firm uses to operate those wallets? Because if the people are shit, doesn't matter what the blockchain says. So some of these, I think we are getting better as an industry. And when it comes to things like platform tokens as well, some of them at the point of creation, they were created because of idealistic visions of sort of this decentralized finance world. I love that. I mean, that's a great start. And then there's another category. People who are saying, okay, well, the most efficient way to do it is to not be subject to some of the constraints of securities laws and company laws. So that might be a second category why someone would sort of create these platform tokens. There's also a third category, someone who's just outright setting out to commit fraud. Unfortunately, I think trying to differentiate between the three categories sometimes may not be very easy. And I think as an industry, we need to do better.
Right. I think one of the major lessons are not to let us start, right? To let us start, right? No matter.
None of them would tell me that you're intended to commit fraud.
Exactly. I think, I think time is up, but I would let's have the last 5-10 minutes. I open up the floor and see if you have any question. Well, Ken.
I have one suggestion and one something to share about the market. Very important. Everybody who must know. So, SFC is qualified to take care of the virtual world. So, right? So why not? You need a thief to catch a thief, correct? So you need for another SFC to take care of them. And the regulator come from that. You know, the SFC committee consists of Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Solomon, those days. So this will solve to make the industry take off. Talk to John Lee. He will answer you. John Lee, right? I'll see you. Okay, second thing, Temasek. Very important on the Singaporean. We lost 270 million US, small money. Temasek have 600 billion. So there's less than 0.05 we can afford to lose. But Temasek lost a lot of money. Almost I dare to say here, and for private consumption, we lost half our MPF money. If you have the whole life, increasing GST. Okay, why Temasek? Temasek always invest near the end of the trend. Remember that. And they all like every let me go and find Temasek. Take 10 million bucks. Temasek is used as a PR marketing for all these boys. So don't ever see Temasek as a good thing, huh? No, and then you should short the thing. That's what it's important to know. Okay? That's all you need to know. Remember what I say?
Yeah, so when Hong Kong launch our own fund, right? We should learn the same lessons.
Okay, next please. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Hey, first I want to say, Henry, great job moderating in the presentation. Two quick questions. First, it has been said that some of the assets were transferred, FTX assets were transferred to the Bahamas. How does this complicate things? Second question is really kind of more for Gary and Robert. Do you have any thoughts on how to actually implement a mechanism for checking proof of reserves? And also, given the fact that the Merkle tree, due respect Adam, as a proof of reserves mechanism does have some shortcomings in that it will not capture information that's off-chain.
Maybe I'll have a go at the first question about the transfer. I think there are allegations, obviously, and I don't think it's proven. But I'll go back to the point where the company itself is in a Chapter 11, which is a debtor in possession regime, which means that the company still has control of its own business and operations. And so you would expect that the company would do what it would normally do, based on hack, or if it had money that was transferred out without authorization, they would try and issue that back. So we're not in the realms of Chapter 7, which is the liquidation regime. We're not in the realms of what Hong Kong are familiar with in terms of seasoned transactions and fallbacks. We're very much in that. The company is still in the driving seat, so they will do what they can do.
On the proof of reserves question, I think we have to ask ourselves, is that the right metric for the assumption that we're holding? So I think a really good illustration would be, for example, all the studies that a number of governments have done on stablecoin. So in the US, the President's Working Group, MAF, HKBA, everyone. And one of the important questions they ask is, what is the right operating model for the thing that we're expecting it is? So if we're expecting it to behave like a stablecoin, i.e. one coin equals $1, then we're effectively assuming that it's behaving like a payment system, right? So if it's a payment system, what is the model typically used in the different jurisdictions for ensuring that the $1 of credit is always equivalent to $1 of redemption? It's a float account, right? Effectively client money segregation. Or alternatively, if we want to make the assumption that no, there is a certain amount of risk, but it's an acceptable level of risk based on capital adequacy, then we're effectively running a banking model, which means capital reserves. So before we actually ask, let's look at your proof of reserves, we have to look at what are we looking for? Am I looking for capital adequacy, or am I looking for $1 for $1 segregated client asset? Or am I talking about effectively unsecured debt? in which case I have to look at the full assets and liabilities and the whole works and the whole 10 yards, and and that would be the moment when I hand it to Robert.
Thank you, David. I think David has mentioned a lot of points which I agree as well. Other than that, the proof of reserves, what I mentioned before is about the internal control. We need to have a combination of requirements, not only for the proof of reserves, any internal control reports for the segregations of duties or any other things else like the capital adequacy, the monthly capital adequacy. We need to know what the platform is doing, any investment, all the liabilities component or the investment. If the investment is concentrated on the tokens issued by themselves, or it's just have a table, you should know that. For example, that the platform has a heavy concentration or investment in the Bitcoin or the ETH, or even in the stablecoin. What kind of the portion is here? We should know that the management preference, whether there is any speculative view, and it's just only for the keep it in the stablecoin. And so I think this kind of disclosure is very important, not only on the proof of reserves. For example, even it's related party transactions. What I mean is that maybe we should know that every significant investment that is targeted, we set the threshold. If this is the investment is more than the threshold or some materiality, we have some requirement to make them to have some disclosure basis as well. But I think it's really need to work out with the regulators, the stakeholders, to a certain extent, what kind of disclosure levels is enough or not too tough for the market to develop. And I agree is that we should have some crypto expert, or we could or the panel here to set up a committee later to sit down with the SFC to discuss what we should include in this regulatory framework as well. Thanks.
Can I mention? Sorry. Our friend mentioned off-chain. I think yes, the off-chain liability arrangements. If you look at FTP, they didn't, all these would not solve the on-chain liabilities. But even in the old days of Enron, they have off-balance sheet liabilities. So I think is very important. On the blockchain technology, there's technology to put these on-chain, but that needs to work with the regulators. And I know some of the exchanges that I know, they have this redemption problem. I know one of the exchanges, actually, they're issuing, on-chain liabilities, that they're issuing IOU on for their creditors on-chain. So that's one solution.
I don't want it.
Just maybe add one more point there. Just again, back to kind of key theme. It's regulated in a sense, in a regime that is also professional, right? Being regulated like in Bahamas, I guess, we'll see what the result is. So I think it's a consortium working together in the right regime, because again, a lot of this has been done over the last century, and it doesn't need to be reinvented. It needs to be tweaked for the next century, which we're working on. And I would say, even for us, very quietly working with SFC, since we, push for the licensing, push for further licensing. I mean, we push for a lot of things. I mean, it's not widely publicly known, but that's not the point. I think as we've been developing this internally and around the industry, it's professionals, right? There's a reason why there are professionals and professional bodies, because I think a lot of things we discussed today, your average customer is not going to really go into detail. I mean, who really reads through terms and conditions? Exactly. Exactly. So we have three people. So I have three people looking at terms and conditions for me. So one other point I want to make on this is it's really an evolution, right? Don't expect this to happen overnight. And we just need to play it a step at a time. Just give you an example. Back to your question on the Merkle tree. Proof of reserves, technologically, it's doable, right? But there's also, as we push for regulatory framework, there's actually inherent regulatory contradictions. So actually, we've been pushing for a DeFi fund to be launched for the last year or so. And SFC answers, it doesn't fit in their current rules and laws, right? It's just written in a certain way. You have to have custody, but then we're trying to push for self-custody or a custody solution that will solve some of these problems. So we're working very closely with regulators to solve that, because you don't need a lot of Merkle tree and all that stuff if it's yours, right? If the wallet is yours, but kind of we're looking at what's hybrid solution so that you're protected, regulatory frameworks can evolve, and then us as practitioners can do our job, and the industry can thrive because of that.
Actually, I do want that one. I think in the asset management space, one of the pain points that I think generally the industry has seen is all of the people we're used to going to support a fund infrastructure. At the moment, it's not just the regulator who's sort of trying to catch up with technology. It's all the fund administrators, all the custodians, all the people who actually support the traditional fund structure product. And so one of our jobs, I think sort of as hopefully the more innovative part of the sector, is to actually bring in some of these service providers so that they can start using the technology to support the existing and trusted infrastructure that we're used to seeing, like a fund structure, because they serve very, very legitimate needs for investors who want to actually pay a professional money manager or professional asset manager to manage their wealth. And we need these infrastructure to actually support these structures in order for these things to take off. So that is actually really, really interesting pain point that I think as an industry globally, we're still trying to solve. There are players, for example, Standard Chartered and a number of other big name banks who are actually trying to get into that, properly get into that space with good investments. But it's probably still sort of a developing area.
Yeah, I think lastly, I think maybe before that, I think it is I want to say thanks to Lawrence and Gary particularly, because Lawrence has spent a real long time to persuade, of course, FSC to get to standard and grant the first Type 9 asset management license for his firm. And now we have more than 8 of those obtained the virtual asset management license. And obviously, and that you have spent more than 2 years with SSC on that, right? And so as well for OSL, spent like at least 18 months with them, right? To educate them and to get the first Type 7 license. Now we have expecting a new BSB license regime by next March next year. So one of the things is that of this group of people, this panel, as Robert has mentioned, I think of trying to set up a new association for all the license co or whoever the individuals or corporation want to get SSC license or BSB license so that they can get the same standard. So I think that's very important, and of course, and particularly with these FTX incidents, all that I think is a lot more important to our Hong Kong public and the investor. And I'll say, so just the touch. I mean, that's the QR code. But I think we have the time for the last question for Albert, right?
Hello, everyone. This is Albert from Sydney Capital. You got so much happy to join this today, because I see that a lot of people sharing different mixed comments, trying to advocate for the ecosystems. And you raised a lot of questions. Sorry, I stand because I'm sitting in the back, so make sure everyone can read my mouth. That's what I'm saying. You asked very good questions about variations, and I do think Robert wants to answer on that. It's true that for HKBA, I think they're very, very hard on doing the variations part, giving the best practice to the industry. But so far for time being understand is based on the disclosures in some keynotes or some of the matters to be disclosed as a kind of disclosures on the audit reports. But very speaking, I think there's something that we can, I can share with all of you today is, AICPA and SAMSON in early this year's January 2022, they have issued the best practice on the variations on the virtual assets. And accounting treatment is based on different circumstances. I think anyone of you who interest will do some research on this report. Or what I can say is that best practice AICPA joined with CIMA on the variations, and they provide the accounting treatment, the accounting model for the variations. Right. So, Robert, I think as the Big Four practitioners, I think you advocate to HKBA trying to leverage some of the resources from best practice in the market. Right. Today, I heard many people talk about regulatory frameworks, governance framework. I do agree with Sam as well as with Gary. Now, even though we do not have the regular frameworks, we always have a governance framework, okay, and the fiduciary uses a different level because internal control is actually owned by the company themselves, right? And auditors, regulators, they're independent parties. So from time to time, internal control should be performed and owned by the company themselves. So even though without fraud things, if you look at the whole incident, it's all about governance. It's not only just fraud. All the internal control collapse, all the governance collapse at the very beginning. It may not have any fraud at the very beginning indeed. So I do think governance framework sometimes is much more important than regular frameworks. But of course, in the whole ecosystem, well, regular framework, governance framework, they are all interrelated. That is true, all right? And quite interesting to me today is before the FTX incidents, we don't want the regulators involved too much. After the incidents, right, I heard about a lot of things, SFCs do more, blah, 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 okay. But when you look at all those crypto-friendly countries, I think they are much more busy for the time being promoting the crypto business rather than fixing the leak, right? So this is what I would like to share. And we expect FC to invent some new things. We should also depend on things. Well, as an investor, how we assess the governance framework of the company. It is always there. It is always there. Thank you.
Yeah. We will definitely invite you to join our association, right?
I didn't know that. So I am the ex-governor of IIA and also the ex-MIC governors over the trust of Tong transfer.
Thanks everyone. Time is up. Sorry for that. I mean, a little bit overrun. I mean, hopefully, we have all of you. Thanks to you guys. I mean, I'm very grateful for the panel here. They're all and King as well, and they're all very busy people, and very grateful for them to be able to join this panel within such a short notice. And of course, thanks for all of you. I know all of you are very busy as well, and join us on Monday morning, 8 a.m. is not easy. So hopefully, all of us have learned some very important lessons from professional industry individuals here. And lastly, hopefully have a big round of applause to the panel here. And thank you. Thank you.